Hello, everyone, and welcome to SPE Live. I am your host, David Gibson. All right, today's SPE Tech Talk is with Schlumberger. We'll be discussing reservoir performance and taking a look into unconventional project lifecycle. And as always, this is a live show. And the whole reason we are doing this live is because we want to be able to interact with you, the audience. So let us know where you're watching from. And most importantly, let us know your feedback, your questions, your comments. Please, right? Put those questions and comments into the comment section now or as we go through with the panel later on, right? So that we can be able to answer what you really want to know throughout this live presentation. Remember, this is live, right? We want to interact with you. All right. Typically, data is acquired in pilot wells, but gathering that information can be slow. And these days, time is money more than ever. During this broadcast, we will look at ways to better integrate from evaluation to taking actions, measuring laterals to fiber optic solutions, right? Whew. Lots of really interesting stuff there to be able to wrap our heads around. All right. This will be an absolutely amazing conversation. Joining me for this Tech Talk, and I've gotten permission for this. I'm only going to be using first names because I'm not going to go 3 for 3 on butchering people's last names. So we'll let them do the last name introductions. Is Elia, Raj, and Nick, all with Schlumberger. Elia is a geology domain champion in reservoir performance evaluation. It gets better. While Raj is a technical manager in reservoir stimulation, and Nick, who has the record for longest title of all, he is product champion for fiber optics, geophysics, and acoustics in reservoir performance evaluation. Whew. Hopefully there's not a character limit on the business cards there for having to put stuff on. Welcome to this SPE Live Tech Talks. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, David.
All right, you guys don't have to all speak at once. It's okay.
Thank you.
All right, audience, let's see what you have to say. This is a special LinkedIn Live SPE Tech Talk, right? On this LinkedIn event, there are a few polls, right? So if you go over to LinkedIn and you're in the event space, look for the polls, right? So let's start with this one. What are the main factors in shaping lateral heterogeneity? For those of you watching online, this is your chance to participate in the polls, right? These polls are in the LinkedIn event, like I mentioned, or you could just type your responses into the comments of this SPE Tech Talk stream. All right, Ellie, we'll get started with you. If you could start us off briefly talking about the key input reservoir performance plays in the unconventional project lifecycle. That was a mouthful, but you're the expert here.
Thank you, David. So excited to be here today. So I'm going to start today with just a very quick summary how exactly the life cycle of the unconventional project start with. So basically, we're all really attached to the pilot logging. So it's mainly, this is where we really kind of data savvy, try to get more and more data and try to feed this and try to align a landing point. And based on that, we actually start from within this cycle with the modeling and execution phase. And it's all like trial and error. So maybe we try one setup and then we try to observe what's happening with the monitoring, with the fiber optics, and then we go back and retweak the model, and then we do another execution. So it's kind of a cycle that goes all the way. And this is where I want to highlight the importance of including the horizontal logs, because that's what actually feeds this model going forward. So it always comes back, if we get more logs in the lateral, we would be able to close this loop as much as possible, and then this execution and trial would be limited.
All right. So I know that we're going to have a little bit of a screen share here in a minute. We just had a quick little technical difficulty. It's okay, y'all. It's live. This thing's happened in the oil and gas business, right? Wait, is it coming up? Is it there?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see it. All right, that's okay. That's okay. All right, so let's jump to the next step. What would you say is the most important step for unconventional lateral landing?
So, one important aspect of it, and this is something you mentioned, and this is actually the one of the poll question, which is the lateral heterogeneity. So, if we believe that unconventional reservoirs are exactly obeying the same rules as any other conventional reservoir, then we would definitely have structural dip change from the point we land all the way in the lateral. We would have different type of fault structure, and we would have some facies change. So this is the typical depositional change that happens because of just simply once we move from the lateral once we move from the pilot to the lateral, those facies are changing because of the depositional changes. So then that's the reason that what was one of the question that I had on the poll is the second question is, are we stimulating the same rock from landing point? So that would be the big question. If we do, then we should definitely get the same performance from the landing point of the pilot all the way in the lateral, and that we shouldn't be actually going through this loop of trial and error. So, but the geology, it is what it is, and the heterogeneity is there, and this is something that we have to face it in every single lateral.
So what you're saying is I have to ask here is, so does lateral heterogeneity exist, or is it better to just envision I'm thinking of cake.
Exactly.
Not because I'm hungry. Not because I'm hungry, but because I think that's the good example. Maybe I'm
David, you use the perfect word. This is exactly what we use when we try to describe, if we have less heterogeneity or we have more heterogeneity, the idea of dealing with the reservoir as a layer cake. So this is, in reality, doesn't happen. Doesn't happen in most of the laterals. Once we land, once we start to kick off from the pilot, everything changed. And this is what we're missing, but by not acquiring more logs in the lateral, because we would be blind. I don't know what's happening once I kick from the pilot all the way.
So let me ask you this, because obviously you've been a part of many of these, right? How many times have you actually seen it where it is a layer cake style in an unconventional?
Well, it's I can tell you it happens for sure, but definitely still, even if it's not a structure, even if it's not a problem with the faults or any kind of a big geohazard, fractures plays a big role in that. So this is something that we have to accommodate in the lateral, and that's the reason we are actually trying to present this as one of a new workflow, what we call an unconventional insights. And the whole idea is, which is a big question that comes from many of our clients, many operators, how can I use those logs in the lateral? Yes, I have a log, how can I use it? And this is where this workflow is trying to achieve. So by starting from our through-bit imager, the through-bit, the dipole service, the sonic, we try to build a 3D model, and then based on the 3D model, we actually can fill the 3D model even with any kind of property we like. And then by using the 3D far field service, then we're trying to bring the fracture from the well bore to the reservoir scale. So we have to remember, when we bring all this in a model, definitely it has to have, definitely there is assumptions, but this is what we're trying to reduce. We're trying to reduce assumptions with acquiring logs. All the way goes to the modeling, and from the modeling, we can definitely adjust the different scenarios going forward. And we need to validate this model, and this is where the fiber optics come into play.
Wow, I mean, it's a lot of ways, a lot of different things to be able to put together, to be able to characterize. Maybe like making a cake, you got to have a lot of different ingredients there.
Exactly. This is the ingredients.
All right, so you mentioned fiber optics there. All right, so I want to jump over to Nick here. Nick, I think this is where you come in, right, to tie in all this together. We've touched on data resolution issues, operational challenges, and more. What can fiber optics and technology offer for stimulation and strain monitoring?
Excellent. So thanks, David. And as you mentioned, long name, long job title, short and to the point here with fiber optics. So there's a lot of exciting development in fiber optic technology lately. And here you'll see on the animation on the screen, we've got two main areas here. So first of all, what in the treatment well, permanent fiber installations, and there's a lot of cost and risk associated with permanent fiber behind casing in an unconventional well. But what technology fiber optic at a wire line.
Hold on, Nick, I'm going to stop you real quick.
Line in a treatment well. So you see on the animation here on the left-hand side, a typical stage frac plug and perf type job.
Can you hear us okay, Nick?
Sorry, was there a question there, David?
Oh,
yeah, I can
you
hear
were
you.
just
Can you hear
cutting
me?
out real bad, like I had a bad cell phone service. So I'm not sure if you're the one that might be sharing screen, so we might have to stop your screen share just for a minute so we can hear your dialogue, and then we'll go back and play the animation there.
Yeah, it should be my screen
sure
here. So let me just restart it so everyone can see.
All right,
yeah, so let me try that again. So yeah, fiber optics are really changing the way.
Go ahead, Nick. Sorry,
can you hear me? Yeah, so fiber optics are really changing the way that we can monitor stimulation in real time. So we have the option today to deploy in a treatment well with wireline packaged fiber optics, enabling the ability to monitor cluster efficiency in real time. And I noticed from the poll that not a lot of people today are utilizing fiber optics for monitoring their stimulation. There's some focus on offset well pressure monitoring, or seismic, but really what fiber optics does from the treatment well is evaluate the cluster efficiency in real time and make real-time pumping decisions. You can take that same technology and deploy it in an offset well, and from an offset well, we can actually monitor the strain field and fully characterize the strain propagation using fiber optics.
Excellent. And Raj, jump in here and help us out a little bit with this even more.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So I guess I'll go back and I'll start from the backwards. So we'll start talking about the reservoir recovery, how much we recover from, I guess, some of these wells that we're drilling and putting lots of sand in the ground. Asha, if you could switch to my slides, please. One of the things that we need to understand is how are we draining these reservoirs? Are we evenly developing the entire rock around our well bores, or are we losing out on some of these areas where we have different reservoir properties? And how would that impact on overall recovery? So that's the first thing we need to start thinking on, how the drainage area looks like. And then also from there, we need to think about planning and execution of the subsequent wells. So when we go for subsequent development, what kind of reservoir we'll be dealing with? Are we going to have some depleted areas where we had some different reservoir parameters, and we're going to have some virgin areas, and how it's going to be? And then based on all of that, I guess what we need to understand is how much time we have to plan for these wells. Do we plan ahead of time and consider all of these factors? And what will be the cost associated with it? And will we get the added production to justify that cost? And those are some of the key components we need to look at when we're trying to understand the reservoir performance in these unconventional reservoirs. Because once we leave something behind, there's no easy way to go get back from these ultra low permeability rocks. So whatever we left behind is for good.
Excellent.
So with that in mind,
sorry,
go ahead.
No.
So with that in mind, what we decided is to ask the question ourselves and our clients, what is the best completion strategy? How do we go about defining it? And working with Elia and Nick here, we developed a workflow where we start with, as Elia mentioned, with characterizing the reservoir from the pilot well, and then the lateral well logs and the characterization to build a DFN model and a 3D far field model, and use that to analyze and characterize how the hydraulic fractures will grow and sensitize those for different completion strategies. And once we have all of that done, then we can look at all of those completion strategies by their production potential. So now we can compare, hey, if we pump X design versus Y design, or if we pump X design at the part of the well bore and Y design at the part of the well bore, what will be the production impact? And then, of course, I guess, as Eli mentioned, the time is money, and in many cases, either the rig is waiting on us or the completion crew is waiting on us. How can we do it in operational timeline where we can take 2 to 4 weeks to look at the all the different scenarios, and in terms of completion design, strategy, perforation cluster design, water pump schedule we have, and that's where the data analytics piece come in, because we know in unconventional reservoirs we have a lot of data, so we can crunch through that data, come out with the best possible scenarios, and then run them through a physics-based model to try and get understanding of what's going to drive the performance. And here on the right hand side, the picture kind of shows, so we can take the lateral reservoir, look at the differences as we see, but we definitely see there's a character change in the reservoir. And then we look, take all of that into account, have our base design, and then plan and look at different designs to see if we can outperform the base scenario, the geometric completion that we typically do, and find ways if that's going to give us the more production, and will it be justifiable for the cost that we'll be spending on it.
So Raj, is that one of the hardest parts here, is being able to show the performance at the end of the day and being able to get the operator to be able to agree to spend the money ahead of time to be able to optimize their wells?
Yes, yes, and as we can see in the poll, we have one of the question, and I think there are two challenges. One, yes, is the cost benefit. Do we really get the benefit for the cost and the effort the people and the company is going to spend? And then the second one is operationally how feasible it is to do. Can you figure out that, hey, some stages you're going to pump X design versus some stages you're going to pump Y, and you're going to flip flop between the different wells. In typical cases, we're going to have 3, 4, 5 wells getting stimulated one after the other. So how are we going to keep track of all of those things? So all of that is required considerable planning, but we have done that for several operators where if you do it right, it is achievable.
So now, Elia, while Raj was giving his presentation, I noticed you were shaking your head a lot, yes, when he was talking about the data side of this. Care to elaborate a little bit on that?
So yeah, just to go back, just to mention on or second Raj idea is that when we bring more data into the model, then the execution would be easier, and then those decisions that we need to take, needs money and time, as Raj said, those decisions can be taken even faster and definitely more efficient. So that's the reason we're trying to push this overall workflow. So then it would be easier to take the decision. Okay, so this is where this is where the landing point will be, and then logging in the lateral that try to identify the main hazards, and then planning based on that. That will give you a better and faster execution. So this loop going for, if I go back to the previous slide, the first slide, where this loop of trial and error, you try to minimize this loop as much as possible, because you have actually data that kind of back up the way you're going to treat the reservoir. And this is where Raj comes in and develop and actually try to show different type of scenarios, how to capitalize, how the best way to capitalize on this, using the best scenario, best completion scenario.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to remind the audience once more, you guys be sure to answer the questions, the poll questions that are in the LinkedIn event, right? As well as be able to ask your questions here. You've got 3 experts. I mean, did you not hear their titles at the beginning of this? These are the guys to be able to ask, right? Not me, certainly not me. I'm a drilling guy. I don't know anything about what they're talking about, but it's all fascinating, right? This is great stuff, right? If y'all don't ask questions, I'll just keep asking my own and be selfish the whole time. But we do have one question here from YouTube. I'm going to say this is Sharmiza R. It says, let's move it to the screen. By using fiber optic wireline, can we collect more accurate reservoir parameters such as porosity, permeability, wettability, etc.? And so our prediction will be more reliable. I think Nick's talking, but he was on mute.
Sorry, it was a little slow to come off there. Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it really highlights the power of fiber optics all the way from your ENA, exploration and appraisal drilling, all the way to decommissioning of the well. It's multi-physics applications, and we can leverage the power of fiber in all stages of the well. So when you talk about the porosity and the different petrophysical properties, although fiber can't measure those directly, what we can do is use the fiber optic data in a borehole seismic capacity to delineate those properties across the reservoir and get a better understanding of how the properties vary within the reservoir. So it does help us to get a much better understanding of the petrophysical properties of the reservoir by combining other wireline or LWD measurements with the seismic tie from the borehole seismic and delineating that across the reservoir. So yes, it can be very helpful in that aspect. Very good question.
Just to add on that, sorry, David.
No, come on. This is your show, not mine.
Yeah. So to add to Nick as well, this is where the through bit comes into the play as well, because we have different type of logs that, including what we call the through bit pulsar, which is it's exactly like an ECS or lethal scanner that can be run on through bit. So that actually gather more reservoir parameters. This is beside definitely the basic log, like the triple combo, neutron density, spectral gamma ray. So that actually add to the overall understanding as well of the reservoir. And then it comes to the same point. If we acquire those logs with the through bit, definitely we would have a better understanding, and based on that we can plan ahead in the lateral.
Excellent. All right, so we've got a couple of questions here, but I have to give a quick shout out. I see that Jabe Wu is watching today, and Jabe's an old friend of mine from working for Schlumberger back in Australia, so glad she's here. Love that she's watching. So we've had two different, they're essentially kind of the same question. Are we going to talk some more about specific cases where the workflow was implemented from end to end? And can you share more cases of production increases after fiber optic driven recommendations? So looking more towards the results of having to put this into play. Can you guys speak to that?
Yeah, so I think if I start on the fiber optic side, if we can share my screen, I've got a good example here of how we're utilizing fiber optics to really understand the propagation of the fracture using a forward modeled solution. So, historically, what you're doing is you're validating, your success based on changes in production from one well to another when you change your recipe. But what you don't know is where that difference comes from. Which parameter are you tweaking? So the combined fiber solution allows us to actually take the forward modeled solution of how the frac actually propagated in height and length and characterize that and match it back to your pre-job hydraulic frac modeling to validate it. And then, we can tie that to the various different increases in production from well to well and from pad to pad. So fiber is quite useful in actually closing that loop. There hasn't been a technology that can really tell you exactly from cluster efficiency in the treatment well to frac propagation in the monitoring well. Historically, some microseismic techniques have been used to try and do the discrete fracture network and validate post-fact, but nothing as complete of a solution as what fiber can deliver today by combining the treatment well and observation well and feeding it back into the model.
Raj, can you add in some more here as well?
Yeah, sure. So as Nick said, I think the overall understanding of how the stimulation treatment went, how far the reservoir, how far the hydraulic fracture fluid is going in the reservoir, and then how effectively are we stimulating this reservoir, will get us insight back into where the production is going to come from. So with Eli's model that he built from the reservoir characterization and Nick's data from actual stimulation, now we can calibrate the reservoir model, calibrate how the hydraulic fracture stimulations move, and then we can predict the increases in productivity. And then, in terms of the examples, we cannot go into the specifics. However, we have applied the workflow end to end in Eagleford, in Permian, and in Anadarko Basin, where operator had various different objectives why they wanted to acquire the data and what they wanted to achieve. So in many cases, production increase is not only the goal; it's also understanding how effectively are we really stimulating the reservoir and prepare for the second phase of the recovery, which could be enhanced oil recovery or further developing reservoirs with the infill wells.
Right, and just to add on that, it's also, as was mentioned about the further infill development, it's about the well spacing and the well sequencing, right? The treatment sequencing on the further development pads. You want to make sure that you've optimized the spacing of your well, not only to avoid frac hits, but to optimize the sweep of your reservoir with the minimum number of wells drilled. So there's more than just the production from a single well that's on the line. It's the entire field development strategy. And if you're talking reducing 1 or 2 wells from the field or from the pad and receiving the same recovery, this is a huge financial savings.
Excellent. Well, we've got time for one last question. So Elliot, we'll throw this one over to you. Can we use acoustic measurements in the lateral to infer far field heterogeneity?
Yeah. Yeah. So the acoustic measurement can be used in the lateral. So what meant by far field heterogeneity is it related mainly to the fracture heterogeneity, or can be related to the stress heterogeneity. So for the fracture heterogeneity, the far field, this is where the 3D far field comes into the play. So this is exactly how we kind of constrain our DFN, because we can create several DFN. I can create several DFN version, but there's definitely one that can be attributed to the measurement that comes from the image and the far field, and this is where we can combine both of them together and try to introduce a DFN that actually match or try to get more of the real case rather than assumptions, because that's what happens. We assume that we have a specific fracture orientation. We assume that we have a different specific fracture frequency or distribution. We assume even the fracture length, and that sometimes that can be fed from let's say outcrops models, but definitely each lateral has its own story in terms of distribution, in terms of frac length, in terms of frac distribution. So just to answer the question, yes, that can be definitely brought into the model. And this is where the whole workflow of the unconventional insights is actually delivering. So, just as showed here on the slide, this is where we're trying to bring. We bring the structure model, we put this in a 3D model, we bring the 3D far field from the through-bit dipole sonic and from the imager, and we combine it all this together. As you mentioned, David, this is like the cake. Those are the ingredients of the cake, and then it will be ready to digest this cake. So this is what exactly the workflow is.
Yeah, so exactly as Ellie said there, once you have the recipe and you bake the cake, you have to eat it, right? You got to close the loop on the validation. You've got to take the measurements during the stimulation, eat the cake, and see if it was as good as you thought it was going to be. If you bake the cake and you don't eat it, you don't know, right? You just bake the next one. So you got to eat it with the validation during stimulation and close the loop. That's the key to improving the performance moving forward. The cake never gets better if you don't eat it.
Exactly.
All right. With that, guys, I think I'm going to go Probably not bake a cake. I'll just go buy one because that's more of my style than having to do all that work in the kitchen. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Nick, all for being here and being able to answer these questions. For you, the audience that's out there, please still participate in the polls there. The 3 experts on this side of the screen are still going to be active here in the comment section of the event and being able to answer any questions there. Please also reach out to them and connect with them on LinkedIn, right? You can always find stuff there at sob.com, right? So for the SPE Tech Talk from me, David Gibson, thank you all so much for watching. And as always, know your industry.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.